We're only given one time around in this life, and so I just want to make the most of it. When you go to Miss America as Miss Hawaii, you stand out because everyone has a story, an idea, a connection about Hawaii. I think that's what we're all searching for in life, is human connection, and as Miss Hawaii, it's an entree to the world to connect. The things that scare you the most sometimes are the things that I want to dig deeper. Why am I afraid of that? Is it something that I can work through? So in channel swimming, you go from 20 feet to 100 feet to 300 feet very quickly, and then you're just looking down to deep ocean. That day we saw these sharks and they were circling underneath us, and I just lost it. I'm terrified of sharks. Dan, who's a super strong swimmer, and she goes, "Dan, get by Candes." And so all of us just got together to create like a larger mass to scare the sharks away. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong that day. My dad had an accident my senior year of high school. One of the things that molded our whole family so much, because it made you see how fragile life was. He was in a coma for almost 4 years. So we just spent a lot of time, my sister and I, by his bedside and just trying to capture those memories and moments with him. Even if he couldn't talk to us, we felt like he felt our presence, and for us it was really comforting. I always say Hawaii is my first love. Actually, Poet, my son's middle name is Hokulea, so wherever he roams in the world, he will always find his way back home. That's my wish, to Hawaii, because this is where I will always be. I've traveled the world, I've lived in several different places, but the one thing that's always been in my heart and called me back is being in Hawaii.
Greater Good Radio, Connect, Learn, Heal, and Grow is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Thanks for coming on today, Candes.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. You do so much. How do you introduce yourself when somebody meets you for the first time?
It's funny that you say that, because it's always a challenge. I don't know how to introduce myself, and oftentimes it may appear that I do so much, and I've heard that before, but I often struggle with, what do I do, and is it enough? And I don't really do things in a traditional way. I sort of follow my heart and wake up every day with passion. So with whatever project I'm working on. So I guess I would say that I introduce myself with whatever I'm currently involved in, but first and foremost, always as a mother, sister, daughter, partner. You know, I am who I am, and what we do doesn't necessarily define us. It just sort of shows us our path. So I would just say, I'm Candes.
That is too humble. Because when I'm looking on like the website, or I've known you kind of for a long time, yeah. I mean, you went from like Miss Hawaii to like triathlete to, you know, motherhood to author to singing. You have albums to acting. I mean, you kind of look like you've done it all. Are they more like in almost like tours of duty then? Like this is the one stage and okay, I'm moving to the next. Is that how it goes?
I view it a little bit more as when opportunity strikes. And I believe that we are our own worst critics, and we allow ourselves to be held back. And so when I see something that looks slightly challenging and it's a little bit scary to even verbalize, I know that down the road, maybe give me 6 months from now, I'm going to be all consumed in it. And so when the opportunity, for example, Miss Hawaii, it came about because my sister wanted to be Miss Hawaii, and she paved the road for me. And I never envisioned myself being on stage or going to Miss America. I didn't grow up watching it. My mother's an immigrant from Argentina. My father was from California. You know, it wasn't in our playbook. I didn't know many girls in pageantry, and I saw what my sister, you know, what her passion was. She tried all the different programs. I learned so much. In my mind, you know, we were her biggest cheerleaders. And so it opened the door for me to see that Miss America was the largest provider of scholarships to women in the world. And I am a proud woman. I wanted to rise to that occasion. I was like, wow, that's awesome to be able to say that, you know, you contributed to your own education, that you did something where you could represent something and someone in some place greater than yourself. So yeah, I guess I'd say I sort of see an opportunity and I run with it as far as I can go. And then it just so happens that another opportunity sort of reveals itself to me, and then I go down that path. And from Miss Hawaii, that's how I led in, for example, to triathlon. I started going to UH, and then I met a bunch of people who were doing triathlon, and I didn't want to be in a world that was so subjective anymore. I wanted to be in a more objective world. And so I was really attracted at that time to trying to challenge myself physically. So I guess I enjoy it until I no longer enjoy it. And when I'm in it, I really immerse myself. I read books about it. I want to know who founded it, what the history is, how do I fit in, how far will I go, and just try to enjoy every moment, you know?
What would be the most endearing story you can remember from your Miss Hawaii experience?
Okay, so never having done pageantry before, it was a very fast road for me, and I felt very privileged to have had the opportunity to support my sister because it taught me all the do's and don'ts and sort of opened my eyes to the different types of pageants we had in Hawaii and in the nation. So from Miss Oahu was in January, Miss Hawaii was in June, and Miss America was in September. And so as far as pageants go, that's very quick. All of a sudden, I found myself on the Miss America stage, and I literally had to wake up from the whirlwind and say, how did you get here? And what are your goals? And so one of the funniest things was all these, stories I had heard about pageantry. For the most part, it was really a process of self-discovery and having to really dig deep and find out at a very young age who you are, what makes you tick, and how do you communicate that. But the funny story was when I went to Miss America, people talk about how catty the girls can be and everything else. And I hadn't experienced that because I hadn't been in pageantry for very long. And so I found it really funny. It was a complete view into my naivety of the whole thing because Miss California asked me right before she went on stage for her swimsuit, can you put a little self-tanning lotion on me? And I thought, yeah, absolutely. Help out a teammate. I didn't really view them as competition. These were my sisters. These were girls that I had spent 3 weeks with preparing and everything else until I realized that, oh, now my hands are orange and I'm going on stage and she looks fantastic. But I basically had to hide my hands for the rest of the pageants because her self-tanning lotion had also stained my hands. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Was that a
endearing.
sabotage kind of thing? Or she just wanted you to help her with the self-tanning and figured you knew how?
Who knows? Maybe I just didn't know how to use it, or maybe it was a competitive thing. Maybe I was just so naive to the whole experience that I didn't even think that, some of these girls, this was very serious for them. I was just enjoying every moment of it. For me, of course, you want to represent your country, and being Miss America would have been a huge privilege and an honor, but I was so thrilled to be representing my state. We have such a unique place. When you go to Miss America as Miss Hawaii, you stand out regardless of who you are as the representative because everyone has a story, an idea, a connection about Hawaii. Like people would come up to you and say, oh my gosh, you're Miss Hawaii. I got engaged in Hawaii so many years ago. Or, oh, we took our child there for their 10th birthday. And so you just have this, I think that's what we're all searching for in life is human connection. And as Miss Hawaii, it's an entree to the world to connect.
Can I ask you about the hands thing?
Yeah.
So once you realize oh my God, this is not coming off my hands, what was going through your mind?
Was fake it till you make it and just keep a smile on and hopefully no one notices because a lot of being Miss Hawaii, or I would imagine any other person that's in the public eye, is about making other people feel comfortable regardless of how stressed out and how nervous you are inside. And so I felt like if I could just put on a face, at first I kind of felt sorry for myself for a hot minute. And I was like, oh my God, she tried to sabotage me. And then I thought, you know what, maybe she didn't. And maybe everyone uses self-tanning lotion. And maybe I'm the only one who, doesn't even know how to use this stuff because we come from Hawaii and, we have to put sunscreen on versus self-tanning lotion. So I always try to find the silver lining in things. And first and foremost, I am always hopeful that someone will give me the benefit of the doubt. And so I always try to come from, let's give that person the benefit of the doubt. And rather than assume the worst, let's assume that, they never had that intention. And so taking myself sort of backpedaling out of, you could view it as, in a negative way to say, hold on, that's just maybe your insecurity speaking. Let's try to view it as, what did she need? She wanted someone to make sure she looked her best in that moment. And we were friends after, and, it was what it was. But I definitely held my hands down.
Wait, wasn't your talent hula?
I wish it was.
Oh, what was your talent?
As John Rampage always says, I am a singer that moves with music. I sang. Yeah, I always loved to sing. And that's actually my connection, my first connection with you was your brother, Darren. And so I started singing in 5th grade. I tried out for choir. And people never believe this story, but they always say that's impossible. I didn't make it because I was too shy. I wouldn't sing out. I was super awkwardly shy as a child. And so in 5th grade, I hadn't really come out of my shell yet, and I wasn't super confident. And so they put me next to another singer, and he probably doesn't even remember this, Andy Starn, and they said, you have to sing at his same volume. And I was like, okay. So they said, come back next year and try out again. And from that moment on, I found just a love of music. My grandmother was a music teacher. My father played as a musician, Air Force. And I found a love of music, and it was a great way to express myself.
So when you were singing, then you just kept holding onto the mic, or what did you do?
So they divide you up because Miss America is so big and you have 51 contestants. So each day you compete in a different phase of competition. So that day I was actually competing with her in swimsuit. And so, as long as you kept your hands down and to your side, which you had to do anyway, you really couldn't tell. And the rest of the time, I just scrubbed my hands really good and hoped that it would come off, and you couldn't really tell the difference.
Did you feel self-conscious at all, having to going out in a swimsuit and
oh yeah, I was
things
horrified.
Like that?
It was terrible. The first pageant I ran in here was Miss Oahu, and it was run by Lonnie Stone Ka'a, our Miss Hawaii 1991 or 2. I believe it's 1991. I always get the year confused. But she went on to be my pageant director and still is an amazing volunteer for the organization. And I was so self-conscious that I decided to wear a one-piece black Speedo for the swimsuit competition. And when I won the title of Miss Oahu, they said the judge's review was, you have to wear a two-piece or a swimsuit that shows your physical fitness, because we couldn't see anything. You had on, a one-piece that covered up everything. And so, yes, I always feel very self-conscious. I think I'm just sort of, I don't know what the word is, but more, I like to cover things up.
Yeah.
I'm not super comfortable with the swimsuits that are out there these days.
I mean, even as I just listened to that, on my own side, I was like, ooh, that's kind of, I don't know if the word is violating type of comment, which is I need to see more skin. I mean, I understand that's, in the pageantry and stuff, but if I was the one on stage, I'd be like, I don't know, maybe because I entered it. I don't know. To me, I would be worried.
Well, I understood where they were coming from, and I'll tell you why. Because I did more research about the Miss America program, and it started in 1920 as a swimsuit competition on the boardwalk in New Jersey. And so it evolved into a scholarship program, but that wasn't its foundation. And it was to bring more tourists to the boardwalk in New Jersey. And so as I realized that, I thought to myself, okay, the program has evolved since then, but this is part of the roots. And so if I want to be Miss America, then I need to be able to participate and compete in the things that have been a part of the foundation. Now, interestingly enough, since then, there are Miss Americas on the board, former Miss Americas on the board of the Miss America organization, and they actually took away the swimsuit. And I was one of the proponents of the swimsuit remaining as a competitive part of the program because I felt like it was part of the history and the tradition. Not that we're going to, not sensationalize, but what is the word I'm looking for?
Objectify?
Thank you. Objectify women based on the swimsuit. But I also feel like if you are proud and if you are confident, then you should be able to, to walk around. It just shows that you are physically fit. So the program judges you in so many different areas. And the biggest area that is not seen by so many people is the interview. And actually just last night, I was so excited because Miss Chinatown, who's produced many Miss Hawaii, asked me to be a judge this year. And I had the privilege of judging the interview competition last night. And no one ever sees the interview. Not for Miss America, not for, any of the state pageants, not for the preliminaries. But that is the part that the girls work on the most. You have to know who you are, at least have an idea. You could change 15 times between, 20 years old and 50 years old. But at that moment, who are you? How do you describe who you are? How do you find the confidence to be able to talk about it without seeming overly confident, but with having a direction? How do you put into words what are the things that are important to you and what your values are? And so just as that judges who you are on the inside, they need to see who you are on the outside. And oftentimes your outward physical appearance is a reflection of your inner workings. And so as a physically fit woman and as an athlete, I realized, okay, I just need to be proud that I'm an athlete. And everyone's going to look different. We're going to come in all different sizes and shapes. Physical fitness can represent time management skills. It can represent like discipline and all the wonderful things about sports, camaraderie and eating healthy. Even though at the beginning I felt like it was a little bit of an objectification and I felt uncomfortable with it, as I matured as a woman, I realized that, you know, to me, that's not what it represents.
Mm-hmm. One thing that's interesting to me is that you said that you were shy when you're growing up.
Oh, yeah, terribly shy.
And then you're putting yourself on a stage where you have to wear a bikini, you have to speak, you have to sing and do those things. Where did that change?
I guess it goes back to the challenging yourself. The things that scare you the most sometimes are the things that I want to dig deeper. Why am I afraid of that? Where does that come from? Is it real? Is it perceived? Is it something that I can work through? And through supporting my sister, she did the USA program, the America program, she did bodybuilding programs, all the different pageants. And I really fell in love with the Miss America program. I just loved, you know, the support that it gave to the women. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the idea of being able to be a representative of your state, a state that I love so much. I always say Hawaii is my first love. Like wherever, you know, I actually... poet. My son's middle name is Hokulea. So wherever he roams in the world, he will always find his way back home. That's my wish, to Hawaii, because this is where I will always be. You know, I've traveled the world. I've lived in several different places, but the one thing that's always been in my heart and called me back is being in Hawaii.
Why?
There's a grounding, I don't know, to the Aina. I just believe that I'm a better, stronger person here. I feel alive in nature. I love to be in the mountains. I love to be in the ocean. I love the consistency of the weather. I love the people. Like having lived in places like New York where I love to say hi to everyone, whether I know them or not, whether they're a tourist or someone I see every day, you know, and you can do that in Hawaii and people don't look at you like, who's that wacko walking down the street? You know, most of the time you'll get a nice response back.
Can you think of a story then that would illustrate your love of Hawaii to somebody who may not have the same type of perspective?
There's just like a deep down inner calling, and I feel at peace here. I feel grounded. I feel whole. I feel like if given the opportunity, I could conquer any challenge. I don't know, because neither of my parents are from Hawaii. It could be just like the sense of place. It could be my connection to the people. I mean, I went to Pono from kindergarten through 12th grade, so there's a beautiful connection there. I always say that buff and blue courses through my veins. I'm fortunate enough to have my son there. Some of my nieces and nephews went there. So that's a big connection. We've lived all over. I mean, when I was growing up, we moved like 13 times. So
from 0 to 18, you moved 13 times?
Yeah, we moved a lot. Different houses, apartments, and for multiple various different reasons.
Like 13 times in Hawaii or 13 places wherever?
Nope, in Hawaii, just all over the island.
Why'd you guys move so many times?
My parents got divorced when I was younger, so they sort of were moving around in different places. We went through a rebuild of the house that I grew up in, and then we had to move out to rebuild it.
So how was it growing up here for you?
I loved it. I mean, I love Hawaii. People always talk about getting island fever. Well, I come from, of course, I can travel and I have traveled and I feel really fortunate. You know, my family is from Argentina, my mom's side. And so we went to see them every single year. So it's not like I'm someone who's never left the island. So I guess I could imagine if, but most people who get island fever, I think are people who move here and then they feel really isolated. Where for me, I feel like I'm in the best place in the world. So, you know, even though, sure, every time I'm away, I'm reignited and re-inspired to come back and do more things. And I'm reminded how special Hawaii is and how you can find like just a piece of paradise. You know, if you want to be alone, you can. If you want to be with people, you can. People are generally friendly because of the weather. They're outgoing. They're outdoorsy. I am very much an outdoorsy, early morning kind of a person. I found my people, as they say. And Hawaii allows you to do that. Like when I went to Columbia University for my first semester away, I really just struggled. no one woke up till like 11 or noon. And then the sun went down at 3 o'clock. So that's like 4 hours of sunlight. And coming from Hawaii, you know, we start school really early. 7:30 was when we started corral. And so I was in school by 7:30 every day. So of course I signed up for all the early classes. And by the time I finally made friends, you know, at school, they were like, why did you sign up for such early classes? I was like, I don't know, that's what we do at home. So I was sitting there with like me, the teacher, and the TA, you know, like, where is everyone? And, you know, so I finally got the hang of it. And the next semester I signed up for later classes. But I don't know, I like waking up early. You get to maximize your day and you get the best part of the day, oftentimes when people are sleeping. And even when I travel, I love to wake up early and run the cities that I'm visiting and, you know, see things when things are still quiet and not kind of, you know, all hustle and bustle yet.
So you went to Colombia for 1 year?
Just the first semester, actually. Oh. And then I came back. So my dad had an accident my senior year of high school. And it was always his dream for, you know, he was really excited about the prospects of me going away to college. And it was sort of something that like I held on, you know, that was something we had been working on together. And so I went away for the first semester, and then it was just really challenging with everything with his healthcare and everything. So I came back for a semester. And I feel like I had chosen the school that wasn't the right fit for me. It was too large. New York City hadn't really been taken over by Giuliani yet. And so there was a lot of rough spots to the city, a lot of construction going on. So I felt like, I need a smaller environment. So I came back to UH for a semester, and then I went away to Babson.
My son's at Babson right now.
Oh, is he? Oh,
yeah.
Fantastic. How's he enjoying it?
He likes it, yeah.
Yeah, it's
He's
a great
junior.
school. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And they have entrepreneurial business, and originally started actually as an all-male school and then became co-ed. So just a nice small environment, close enough to Boston that you can get a taste of the city if you want to, but in a beautiful residential neighborhood. And then, unfortunately, with my dad's accident, because of his condition, I had to come back again. So I came back to UH. And then at that point, I was already second semester sophomore year. And I was like, to move again, to go back to school. So I could have gone back to Babson, but I decided at that point just to stay here and get my undergraduate degree, which is kind of what led me into Miss Hawaii, because I was able to graduate early. I was able to transfer my credits, and then I just kind of didn't really have anything else going on. And so I thought, I'll put my head down and study. And so I graduated in December rather than the following May, and then I ran for Miss Oahu in January.
So were you your dad's caregiver?
No, I was only 17 when he got in his accident.
Losing a parent, I don't think people understand. At least I didn't understand until I lost a parent.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so my dad had passed away earlier this year, and to watch them suffer through that is like,
yeah,
my
it's so
God,
sad.
so brutal, right? And you had to do it when you were younger.
Yeah, it was like 17 to 21. And, you know, honestly, like, that's one of the reasons, I think one of the things that molded me and my sister and, you know, really our whole family so much, because it made you see how fragile life was and how at any given moment, it's one thing to lose someone, I feel like, immediately. And then in our case, the process, he was in a coma for almost 4 years. And so just to be able to be by his bedside and to see
unresponsive,
someone.
like full coma.
Yeah. But, you know, different people say different things. And we had a lot of experts who came in and had a lot of different opinions. But I believe that he could still sense when someone was there, because when you would talk to him, you could watch the heart rate monitor, it would increase. And actually, funny enough, that's before we even had, you know, GPS watches and heart rate monitors where we were monitoring our own heart rate. That's my first foray into seeing how your heart rate can, you know, go up and down based on your stress level, based on your excitement, based on your, you know, physical fitness or what you're emotionally feeling. So I believe that even though he was in a coma and unresponsive, that there were times that he felt our presence, that, you know, he knew I would read books to him, stories. He had a beautiful piano in his house, and it was one of those really cool, like, modern pianos that you could choose a song and the keys would play. And so we just spent a lot of time, my sister and I, by his bedside and just trying to capture those, you know, memories and moments with him. Even if he couldn't talk to us, we felt like he felt our presence, and for us it was really comforting.
Would you be able to share a story about your father that would give us kind of an idea of the person that he was?
One of my favorite stories about him We were on the Big Island, and he had a beautiful ranch there in Kohala. And he just loved to be on the Big Island. Even though he obviously clearly had a love of the ocean, he also loved to be in the mountains. And he loved to surround himself with nature and be outdoors all the time. And anyway, so he was building this beautiful ranch house on the Big Island. And so we would go back and forth a lot. And, you know, it was an exciting childhood. I mean, there was a lot going on. You know, you had your personal helicopter and personal planes, and, you know, you'd land on the property. So this one time we were there on the Big Island, and we were down. And I think this story really like speaks to his character, because, you know, he and I were just sitting there at like a hole in the wall sushi place. I can't remember what it was called, down by Hawaii on the coast. We had driven down from the ranch, and we were talking, and then he stopped talking, and I could hear him sort of like eavesdropping a little bit. And I was like, oh, what is he listening to? And so I sort of tuned in and listened a little bit, and it was these two men sitting on a table next to us and not saying the best things about my dad. And he just sort of listened and didn't say anything. And he could have like said something, but it was just the way he didn't skip a beat. He didn't let it bother him. He was still joking around and being super friendly with the wait staff. And, you know, he didn't even have to acknowledge that he had heard it. I think like most people, he just wanted the benefit of the doubt. You know, oftentimes people who are super successful are really driven and they're really focused. And sometimes I believe that they can come off as being aloof, or, you know, maybe they're whatever. You know, sometimes people say, oh, they're socially awkward, or they're, you know, so self-consumed. But really, it could just be that they're really so focused on their project or whatever is consuming or whatever's on their mind that they didn't even notice what was happening in the world around them. Like my dad was constantly drawing on a table. Like he drew every engine that he ever made. He sketched it out on, you know, the paper tablecloths that when you go sit at a restaurant, and then he would just fold it up and put it in his pocket. And then he would go to his, you know, his engineer or whatever, and he'd be like, okay, I want to do this and I want to make these changes. And it was the drawing that he had made, or how he adjusted the hull of his speedboat, like through the drawing on the boat, and then he'd fax it in. There were no emails back then, but, you know, he'd fax it in, and then for a new prototype. So I don't know, he was just a really special guy. And I think for those people who got to know him, I think they would say the same.
So I think your father only just, you know, from the news or whatever, as a, you know, real estate developer.
Yep.
But then he's also an engineer on.
Yes, his degree was in engineering, and actually he had dyslexia. So dyslexia runs in our family, and he really struggled in high school, and he was able to go to college and get a degree in engineering. And his passion was actually in boats and developing engines. And so his home building was what he did. You know, how they always say, you do what you have to so that you can do what you want to. So his home building and everything, of course, he loved to create communities, and he loved the idea of being able to leave a footprint and being able to provide housing. But really his first true passion was in invention and developing things. And he loved speed, and he loved powerboat racing. During his time, you know, he won multiple world records, world championships, and held records for the fastest, you know, mile offshore. He crossed the transatlantic with the fastest record holding, brought the title, the Blue Ribbon, back to the United States from England. So he holds a lot of speed records.
Like Formula One of boats kind of thing?
Yeah. So it's called offshore powerboat racing. And so they're mainly V-hulls or catamarans. And, you know, they go upwards of 100 miles an hour. And he was unique in that he wasn't just a driver. He was also an engineer who would develop the engines and design them, but then he also later on became an owner. So through his home building, he was able to fund his passion of being able to race, because he couldn't do both at the same time, being a professional driver, because they required you to do so many events, and then he would be neglecting his business, which he started originally in California and then moved to Hawaii over 50 years ago.
Wow, that guy could do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you ever ridden in one of those boats?
Yes. And actually, before he got in his accident, I was begging him to teach me how to drive it. You know, he would always joke, I'll teach you how to drive it if you promise never to race. And there was one woman who used to race on the circuit back in the day when my dad was racing. Betty Cook was her name. And she was a fierce competitor and a very good driver. So yes, we grew up on boats and, you know, going to all of his races. And he actually designed a beautiful boat for my mom, which we had here. They had a home in Kaneohe at the time, with a pier. And so they would take the boat out. My sister and I were very young, but it was called the Nora's Eagle. My mom's first name is Nora. And he had it all painted in a beautiful like rainbow glitter paint job. And, she always tells the story that, of course she loved it and there was a lot of good stories, but she says it was, one of the most embarrassing moments when you had this super fancy boat that could go so fast and they ran out of gas in the middle of the ocean and had to get towed in and everyone was laughing. And she's like, it happens to the best of us.
So why did he say he didn't want you to race?
I think he thought it was too dangerous. And my dad was really old school, I say that in the kindest way, but, he would always say that girls are for boys in convertibles. And I was like, hey, Dad, I don't know how I feel about that. And I'm sure his views probably would have changed, given the progression of the world and the environment around him. But, we lost him too soon. He was 64 when he got in his accident and just turned 68 when he passed.
Was it a boating accident then?
Yes, the World Championship. He was leading, but it was the first time that so he had already won, I think it was called the APBA. They've changed American Powerboat Racing Association, and they changed the names a few times. But he had won the world record in, I believe it was 1976, and then again in the 80s. And so this was in 1994, close to Thanksgiving.
So he's good.
He was great. Yeah, he was super good. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that I feel really remiss about is the internet didn't really exist. So there's not a lot about him on the internet. His business is really an inspiration to see how he inspired other people. And most of our employees have worked for the business that he started and with him for over 30 something years. So I think that really speaks to his character too, but there's not a lot. So I made it a priority when I joined our family business back in, I guess, the early 2000s. I was able to have him inducted into both the Hawaii Sports Hall of Fame as well as the Hawaii Building Industry of America, the Hawaii Chapter Association, as one of the leaders in developing the sort of what Hawaii is today when you look at construction and home building.
So he's in the World Championship race and he's in the lead?
Yeah, so that year they actually opened it up to have two different categories in the same race, which normally they didn't. And so how it works is they have to do loops around buoys.
Is it in the ocean or
it's
where
in
is
the
it?
ocean. Yeah,
Okay.
usually most of them were held. So he actually met my mom racing in Argentina. So he raced all over the world, the South America Cup, the, European Cups. He raced all over. They would have races and different sort of point systems, and also in the United States. But most of the world championships were always outside of Key West, Florida. So he was there and he was actually going to retire. It was going to be his last race. I mean, he was 64. Most of the racers he was competing against were in their 30s. I'd say 20s, 30s, maybe 40s. So he was in his last race of his career and he really wanted to win the gold again. And he was in first place, but the other, a different category of boats, and there was one boat ahead of him. And so they took a wide turn to try to pass the boat in front of him so that they could finish not only first place, but also what appeared to be first place. And unfortunately, when they took the last turn, the boat flipped and he was held underwater because at that time, the technology had improved. They were going so fast that where before the drivers, if you look back at the pictures, you'd see the drivers with their helmets on and they sort of sat, the boat came like this and they had a little glass here, but then you could still see the drivers kind of bopping up and down on top of the glass. But at this time, they had actually created these sort of bubble windows. And so in order for him to get out, he had to undo the latch and his hand showed markings of bruising. So that there was a struggle and ultimately he just was held underwater for too long.
So one boat created a wake and then his boat flipped.
I don't know all the exact
kind of thing?
specifics about it, but I do know that it was going around a turn and then his boat flipped. So maybe
Were
they
you
took
there?
it too wide. No, we were actually here and I was in a show on campus at Pono with your brother. And so my mom came and she said, your dad's been in an accident and we have to go to the mainland. So my sister was living in San Francisco at the time. So we all flew up together. But it was really a beautiful story because he was such a legend that the driver of the boat behind him, who obviously would have got first place since the American Eagle, which was the name of my dad's boat, was out of the running, he actually stopped, got out, and helped to rescue him. So it was, really telling of the industry and, just his impact that he had on it, both as a racer and as an engineer, developing some of the engines that went on to fuel some other world championship teams that used them in their boats, called the Gentry Turbo.
So parts of your dad do you find in yourself?
You know, it's hard. I don't really know. I really connect more with my mom just because she's been around. You know, we've been together for so long. And, you know, having lost my dad at 17, I would say I connect with him when I hear stories from other people. And so sometimes people say, oh, I don't know if I should tell you, you know, because they don't want to bring up anything bad. And I say, I absolutely would love to hear you talk about him. I said, I feel more connected and learn about him every time someone tells me a beautiful story. And so I always invite people, if you knew my dad, come share your story with me. You know, I always say that one day I would love to write a book about it based on stories of other people. But unfortunately, he was 20 years older than my mom. So he actually would have been 93 this year. And so that generation, we're losing them very quickly, you know, and along with it, the stories.
Touching or memorable story that somebody came up to you and told you about your father?
My sister and I and my mom, who was with my dad for the majority of the time when he was building his company here in Hawaii, which is now known as Gentry Homes. He had multiple companies, but that's the one that's most notable because that's the one that's on, you know, all the residential developments. We go to the openings of the new model homes, and there isn't a time that I go that I'm not stopped by someone who says, working at your family business has not only changed my life professionally, but personally. And so there have been multiple times where people have told me that through Gentry Homes and all the subcontractors, they were actually able to meet their partner. And now they tell us about their children. And I'd say those, you know, those stories are like the most heartwarming because you realize that as a human, you can have an impact on people's lives, even if you don't know it, long past, you know, you being here, long past when you're gone, you can still impact their lives in a really beautiful and memorable way.
Yeah. You know, that reminds me of my father's funeral. We did it in July. And the thing that stood out to me, like really clearly, was how many people that he worked with came to it.
Yeah.
I think it was, when I was kind of calculating just in my head, it was at least 20% or more of the people that were there. And there were a decent amount of people. And every single one was like, you know, your father meant so much to me. And some were like older and retired. Some are younger. Some gave gifts from the office and then themselves.
That's beautiful.
And I was like, and my father had retired kind of a while ago. So to me, I looked at that and said, wow,
that's his legacy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. He was able to touch so many people. And it goes to show that your father went above and beyond just doing it as a job, that he loved what he did. And if not, he loved the people that he worked with, you know? Oftentimes, I feel like people think that your legacy has to be because you did something incredible or, you know, you donated a botanical garden. But truly, I think that legacy is how the way you make people feel, you know, when you're gone. If they still can connect to that feeling and they still remember you and it still evokes emotion, I think that's the truest legacy we could leave.
Yeah. My dad had gotten sick in 2014. We got sick. For all intents and purposes, should not have made it. But through a number of things, he made it. And then he lasted until, you know, this past February. But when we had moved him to Seattle to get cancer treatments, I mean, he was there for almost 2 years. I was there for roughly 1 year in that period. We'd switch back and forth. My brother and my sister would kind of switch out, and my auntie and his friends. And I'd watch like who would send him gifts, who would make a call, and so on. And everything just came down to, if this is the end, the only thing that really matters is my family and friends and the strength of my relationships.
Yeah.
It was so ingrained into my brain, and for so many years, that's how I am more or less gauging everything, just unconsciously and consciously. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it leaves a real mark on you. And it just kind of brings you back to, like you said, what's important, you know, where are your priorities? And I don't wish that, you know, like what you went through with your father and cancer, it must have been so difficult to see him, you know, suffering for so long and having to go through so many treatments. But that time, oftentimes people are looking for that like reset to help them find their values, to help them reprioritize. But for people like us who've been through like a really traumatic experience that was extended over a long period of time, you can't get away from that. You can't be shallow. You can't, it's not what's important. And anytime there's busy talk or drama or, effort being expended over the he said, she said, it's like none of that matters. It just matters. Am I there for you? Are you there for me? What can we do to make our unit better? And people talk a lot about community service, and that's like what the Miss America program is founded on. And I always said, as Miss Hawaii, I would always say that community service starts at home. If our unit is strong, then we would need less community service. We would need less people coming to help people if all of our units were strong. And we can't blame those who don't have a strong unit, but we can only do what's within our power, which is to help, solidify that unit. And losing my dad early really solidified my mom, my sister, and I, because that was our unit here. Of course, we had our family in Argentina, but for the most part, that was our unit. So making sure, you take care of your kuleana, that's your kuleana, to take care of your family first, and then your extended friends, and then your extended family, and then your community, and, it all sort of like a ripple effect starts from there.
So I see you with your mom kind of a lot, right? What would be a story that you could share with your mom or about your mom that would give me a good idea of who she is?
Well, she always tells us a story about when she first came to the United States and how my father promised to take her back to Argentina, how he was just going to, come to the United States to work on some of his investments. He was retired at the time. He had actually sold his company. And so they were just going to come for a short time, and then they were going to go back to Argentina. And she always says that, I came here with one little suitcase and I didn't even know the language. And, here she is 50 some years later. And so I think that really speaks to her resiliency, because it's not easy. She was very young and she came into, a blended family, a different culture, different language. And I think she's really handled everything that she's gone through in her life, all the ups and all the downs, which we all do, with grace. And I think that's really important too. And that's something that I aspire to emulate, would be to be able to handle my life and the challenges and things that come my way with the grace that she has shown us.
From an external perception, when people see Candes Gentry, they go, oh my gosh, look at this person, right? Beautiful, went to the best schools, got everything, has a husband, has kids, they think you have it all, right? Like you always look fantastic. You're in like great physical shape. Externally, when you look at it, it looks flawless. What would be something surprising for people to know that on that kind of external perception may not necessarily be true?
I think if they see that, I'm doing a good job, but that's not the case, and they must not know me. Because we all struggle with things, it's really important for me not to focus on the negative, to focus on the positive, because if life has taught me anything, it's that we may not have tomorrow. And so if we get so caught up in the challenges and, the things that are not working out, that we're going to miss the opportunity to potentially spend our last day. And that sounds really dramatic, but that's how I view it, in the negative versus the positive. But the reality is that life throws us a lot of curveballs, and anyone who looks perfect on the outside, I think the biggest mistake is maybe never going up and asking them, hey, how are you doing today? Because people assume you're doing great because, maybe that day you're just getting by or you're just getting through. And there are so many days where I struggle with so many different things. My partner, Steve, he's gone a lot. I am single momming it, and people think, oh my God, she's just working out all day. It's like, okay. So I got up, like many of us, I put breakfast on the table. I fought through rush hour traffic. I got my workout in. Then, I set my meetings. I have between 10 and 2 to get all my personal things and all my work stuff done so I can make it to pick up, so I can take him to his game, so I can put nutritious food on the table. These are all the things that like everyone deals with on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. You still got to go and schlep. You still got to go to the store. You still got to, and then on top of it, maybe you're not feeling well physically, or maybe you are dealing with some health issues, or maybe your family is, for all intents and purposes, falling apart because you have a divorce going on in the family, or you're struggling with one of your, nieces or nephews that's having a hard time. I mean, I don't know. I think kindness is something that maybe we're missing, and I'd say I appreciate that, but that's not reality at all, And I think it's really difficult to deal with people's perceptions of you. So I try not to get so caught up in it. And sometimes I feel like I have to be like the nicest person in the room to even have someone talk to me, because they all think, oh, whatever, like she knows everyone, or she's, and sometimes you walk into a room, you don't know anyone and everyone seems to know everyone else. And I guess it just comes down to we're all humans and we all go through the same feelings, struggles, insecurities, stresses.
So for somebody who's kind of viewing this and saying, okay, well, on the inside, I feel this way, but on the outside, I may present a different way, or so on. And how do I make these things that, are uncomfortable for me or so on into something positive? How do you do it?
Well, I have a girlfriend, her name's Laura, and we always say she has the Laura-isms. And so she always tells me to fake it till you make it. And the harder the day, the brighter the lipstick. And so those are all like super exaggerated responses to your answer. I don't ever want to be seen as someone telling someone what they need to do, because if anyone needs to learn, it's me. I think we all have something to learn from one another. So unlike today where I'm talking a lot, I try to be a good listener. I think that's really helpful.
Well, today's about you.
I was a little anxious I'm not super comfortable talking about myself.
Why?
I'm one of those people who'd rather be in the doing than the watching or talking about it. I always feel like I might give myself like bad bachi too if I talk about it before it happens. And so like recently, Steve was feeling really proud and wanted to share that I was going to be doing an upcoming swim channel. And so he like shared with some of our friends, oh yeah, Candace is going to be going to to Maui next weekend and she's going to be swimming the channel. And I was like, I got home. I said, please don't ever do that again. And he's like, don't do what? He's like, I was just so proud of you. And I said, yeah, but it hasn't happened yet. And then ultimately that channel crossing got delayed because of bad weather. So then there was like extra pressure. Oh, how did it go? Oh, you guys weren't able to do it, huh? And then you start thinking, oh my God, like now they think I can't do it. Or maybe they think that like, I was talking or maybe like putting out there about myself. And, coming from Hawaii, it's ingrained in you. You should be humble. You need to be humble. You can't just be like, grandstanding all the time. So I said, I never say anything until it's accomplished, until it's done, until we've actually crossed the channel. I am on the shore on the other side. Then you can talk about it as much as you want. I said, but until then, I just, best not to say anything.
Which channel is it?
Well, my sister and I, with our friend Cindy, we swam all 3 Maui Nui channels last year.
How far is that?
And the year before. They all approximate between 8 to 9 miles. Plus miles, but really at the end of the day, point to point, it's about 10 miles with the current. So the longest one, which I thought I'd never survive from, it was my first one with Cindy, and we jumped in with another group from Hawaii, and that took us 7 hours and 48 minutes.
Is that with the current or against it?
Channel swimming's interesting because you don't know. Without, the current usually is sideways, like going around the island, and you're swimming between the islands. And so ideally you want to focus more on the tides. So you want to leave on an outgoing tide and you want to land on the other shore in an incoming tide, but that doesn't always happen because especially the Maui Nui channels, they're all average around like 5 to 6 hours. And so usually the tide changes about 12 hours. But in the middle of the channels, those are the 3 most protected channels and the shortest ones in the Hawaiian island chain. But they still, when you get into the middle, the winds can pick up. And even if it's not windy that day and it's like super glassy around the shore of like Lanai, for example, and Maui, in the middle of the channel, it can be really windy. Or when you're between Molokai and Lanai.
So you have escort boats or how does it work?
Have to have an escort boat, yeah. For open ocean channel swimming, the rules are that you can only wear a swimsuit, a cap and goggles, and that you can not have any like physical assistance. So you can't touch anything. So you can't lean on, no floaties in the water. You can't touch the boat. So you can have a kayak next to you or a boat. In our case, we had...
Do you eat or drink something or no?
Like every 30 to 45 minutes. And with
They
as
just
I've
throw it in the
learned.
water or something and then you just grab it?
Exactly.
Oh.
So they throw it on a string, like on a rope, and then they'll pull it back in because the first one we actually
Like a buoy.
Like a buoy, but ideally not a flotation device. Yeah. So you can have something where the water bottles are attached to it and it floats enough so that the water bottles won't sink. But for the most part, the water bottle won't sink, even if it has fluid in it. And then you wrap your goos or bars or grapes or whatever you want to have with rubber bands around the outside of your water bottle. And then you can number your water bottles if you want to, or just have them throw you whatever. And then they just throw it in, and then you have like a little carabiner attached to a rope, and then they'll pull it in once you're done. And you stop about every 30 to 45 minutes because even though you don't realize, because I come from a running background, so you're sweating and you can physically see like the salt on your skin, or you can feel, the heat, and your clothes gets wet, you start chafing, whatever, you're sweating. In the water, you don't know you're sweating, but you still are. And salt actually pulls out, just like, when you're cooking meat, you put the salt on it and it pulls out all the liquids, right? So the same thing happens with all of our cells when we're in the ocean. And so you need to continue to hydrate. Otherwise, you'll dehydrate really quickly. And then you start cramping. And that's when you can get in trouble in the ocean. If you cramp, then you can't really stay afloat. So you got to learn to starfish like they teach your kids when you're learning how to swim.
So you do a lot of technical sports because triathlons, this type of thing, this is technical. You have to make sure that you're properly hydrated, proper electrolytes and everything, or you're going to drown.
Yeah. Yes and no. Once in a while, I like to look. I mean, I do wear a GPS watch. I do like to know what my course was and the numbers, but I'm not like what they call like a numbers geek, because a lot of like cyclists, and with the background that I have through triathlon, they're very much involved with like what zone were you training at? What was your heart rate? How many calories? They do a lot of studies. So I am sort of in the middle. I'm not like a just go with the flow, but I'm also not like on the really analytical side, because frankly, I just think it takes up too much time. But in general, for me, what I found that works the best is consistency. So having a core fitness level in a variety of sports to try to eliminate or avoid injury, and then always making sure that you're eating a healthy diet, which is hence how the cookbook sort of came about. Because if you have those three already there, then to ramp up to an endurance sport that is technical, it just takes a little bit of tweaking, but it's not like a complete overhaul of your life or your body or, your fitness level. So I generally try to keep, just as I say, I'm like a, just a casual athlete now, but I do like to challenge myself. And again, it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which was find something that scares you and then dig deeper and find out why. I never thought I'd be a channel swimmer. I'm terrified of sharks. And, it's about finding the right people, and it's about like easing yourself into it, and familiarity breeds content. And now I'm more comfortable in the ocean. And, like when I ran into you that time and you said, oh, we saw the tiger shark out there. And I was like, oh my gosh, should we go out? Should we not go out? Or during COVID when they had that huge bait ball right by Kaimana, and, you had Galapagos sharks coming in, 7-footers coming into the channel. And, literally at that point, I was like, what else are you going to throw at me? We're locked in our house. Life as we know it has ended. You're afraid to go outside and have interaction, human connection with someone, because you could kill them if you unknowingly are carrying the disease. And now you have this, bait ball that's bringing in all these sharks. So the one release that you had, something that brought you happiness, was now you're terrified to go in the ocean because you could get, bit by a shark, or I don't know. It was just like so much. And then you say, okay, calm down. You're going to live to see another day. But with that sort of like, you sort of challenge yourself, like, okay, it's scary. And I see the shark over there, and I take Poet down to see the shark when they finally let us out of the house and said, okay, people can be out and about in groups of 2 or 3. And we'd go down and watch the shark. And then one day our pod, we were able to now be in a group of 5. So we'd, still go for our swims. And one day we actually said to one another, let's go see the shark. Like, let's go see what this scary shark is all about. And you could see, because the drone would fly over and they'd be filming it and taking pictures. So wherever the drone was, you knew the shark was right under it, So we all huddled up together, and I actually have a video of it. My sister went with her GoPro and she's filming us, and we come up and we're like, where's the shark? And the swimmer, maybe 20 yards from us was like, look down. And we look under, and there's this huge 7-foot shark. I'm not 100% sure if it was a Galapagos or what kind of shark it was, but he swam right under us, and she catches it on film. And, so we thought okay, well, it was scary, but it wasn't that scary. I'm still terrified of tiger sharks, but For the most part, I'm hopeful that they're not as interested as us, and we don't look like surfboards, so.
Well, you guys are swimming in the water, so that's a whole different animal.
Exactly.
Right? When you say find something that scares you and then find out why, then what do you do?
Kind of test your limits. Like why is it so scary? And is this because you watched Jaws when you were growing up? Are sharks that scary? Do a little bit of research, like find out who the shark whisperers are. What is the knowledge that they've gained? What are these beautiful animals? Like, how can we protect them? Why are they important in our environment, in our ecosystem? Because they are the apex predators. And, what are the things that they're actually interested in, and what types of fish are they going after, and how can you not look like those fish, and what do you do if you see one? Like all of those things start to make it seem a little bit less scary.
Mm-hmm. So you're turning toward your fear.
Yeah.
Versus turning away.
Like being a mom, I had no idea. Like, yeah, my sister had been a mom 4 times, but I had never been a mom. I never visualized myself being a mom. And it was really scary. So I read like every single book possible. My family was always like poking fun at me. Like, oh, you're reading another what to expect when expecting book. And I said, yeah, because I don't know what to expect, And you hear people's stories, but you need time to process it yourself. And some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, and, just sort of, I don't know. I think we're only given one life, and I want to explore it, and I want to feel alive and to find passion for things. And I do that by sort of digging a little deeper. I don't just want to be on the surface. I don't want to be floating on the surface looking down. Like I want to be in it, And I am not, for all intents and purposes, a swimmer. I didn't grow up swimming. I wasn't on the swim team. In triathlon, it was literally the weakest linked. That's what kept me from being a professional triathlete, was the fact that I was not a good swimmer, because you have to be in the front pack to be able to then get on the bike and, be able to compete in the run. Like the swim is super important, and it comes with technique that you build over time as a child. So it's usually best to like imprint that as a child. I've read all this. I'm not an expert, but I also don't want to be held back because I'm not a swimmer. Well, okay, so I'm not a swimmer by all intents and purposes, but I might be able to go out there. I might be able to swim. Like I remember I qualified for XTERRA World Championship one year, doing a local race here. And, I asked a friend, I said, well, do you think I should do it? And she's like, oh, yeah, I don't know. It's really intense, and it's really scary, and it's super hard. And, I don't know. It's probably not for you. And I thought to myself, okay, not for me. Why? Like, why? Where is that coming from? Like, what's so scary about it? So then I started, and that's kind of like my process too. Like, I love to read books about whatever I'm interested in. And I also like to talk to people who've done it. So
why did they say they thought that for you?
Kind of like
or was it just for them?
I think she was acknowledging that it wasn't for her. She had done it once, and it was really scary, and it was really hard. And so she was, oh yeah, been there, done that, not going to go back. So I had to preface hers with, okay, she's trying to protect me. Again, giving people the benefit of the doubt. And number 2, it wasn't really for her. So she can't really speak to why. She can't get excited and tell me I should do it because it wasn't for her. But I said, but it's for a lot of people. So let me go find someone who it is for and go find out what's exciting about it. Why are they doing it? And what I loved about road triathlon was I was coming out of Miss Hawaii, and it was, like I said earlier, it was objective. So it didn't matter what people thought about your bike, your tires, your outfit, your this, your that. It was who crossed the finish line first. And that had to do with the training that you put in. And so whereas Miss America, you could put in all the training, but then it was up to someone else's perception of, did they like the sound of your voice, the look of your gown that you chose? So it was very subjective. So I went into this, I want to be objective. And that's when I actually got my MBA, was sort of, I came back to Hawaii, applied to now the Scheidler College of Business, and got in. And so I had a part-time job during the day, and then I coached Pono. I went back and started coaching running and things. I was on the intermediate, like an assistant coach, for a couple years while I was going to school.
Is that cross country?
Cross country. And then they had Scheidler, the program, it was called the College of Business at the time, went from 6 to 9 p.m. every night. And so that was sort of my routine. It was
that EMBA?
It was just the regular MBA program. It was a 2-year program. I didn't have enough work credentials to do the executive MBA at the time, because I had graduated from college, gone on to Miss Hawaii, and so I worked as our official state hostess for a year and a half, and then I went straight into school. So while I was at UH, I met some kids who were doing the off-road triathlons, and they said, oh, you should come try it. But I had never really ridden a bike because it was always very dangerous. And so I was like, oh, I don't really have a bike. And they said, oh, you should, so my friend actually got me a mountain bike. And so I started in the mountain biking, and then I discovered the road triathlon. And so the road triathlon was a little bit easier. You didn't have to have like a big group. And I actually met Boca training. I met Howell Boca and his wife Hina, and they just took me under their wings and said, oh, come train with us. He had a really small group in the morning. And it was just, again, I never thought I would do Ironman. I just started doing little Olympic distance triathlons. And then, the seed gets planted. Oh, well, you could go and do this race. And if you qualify, you could do Ironman. And so do I say no because it's big and scary and I've never done it? I actually, to this day, I've never even done a half Ironman. It was like an interesting year where they were switching over the organization, and it was growing so fast as a sport. They were changing the location from the Keauhou Triathlon, which was the original Hawaii qualifier for Ironman, to the Honu Triathlon, and it was going to be Olympic distance. And that's the only distance I had ever raced. So it was this great opportunity, again, going back to what we talked at the beginning, just like seeing an opportunity and saying, okay, I could shy away from it because it's super big and scary, or I could say there's really no expectation, only the expectations we put on ourselves. So do I want to limit myself and not do it? Or do I want to just like jump in and see what happens? So next thing you know, 2 years into it or 3 years into it, I started with the XTERRA World Championships first. I did that every year, and then Ironman sort of came and there was an opportunity to do it. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it.
How many have you done?
I only did one Kona Ironman, only one Ironman ever. I did 4 XTERRA World Championships, which are the off-road, which is what I really enjoyed more. I really love trail running. That was always sort of my passion. And then I did multiple races, like they have national championships and regionals.
What's the difference between the Ironman and the XTERRA?
So different distances. So triathlon is the sport, and then Ironman is the distances of 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon, a 26.2 mile run. And it's all done on road. So courses you generally can practice on, and, obviously road versus off-road. And then XTERRA was also developed, and this is actually kind of cool history about Hawaii. A lot of people don't know that the 2 world championships for triathlon were both founded in Hawaii. So XTERRA was founded on Maui, and the distances were shorter, and it was off-road. So you swam in the ocean, but it was more of an exhibition sport. So instead of doing, Ironman was 2.4 miles. This was 1.2 miles or 1 mile, but they had you do 2 loops, and you ran on the beach halfway through. So it makes it more extreme. XTERRA started later in the day to have a heat factor, which Ironman doesn't, because Ironman takes longer. Then the second is your bike always. And so for XTERRA, the Ironman was 112 mile. XTERRA was usually, I think I can't remember exactly offhand, to be honest. I think it's like 30 something miles, but it would take on average like 2 to 3 hours, where Ironman takes like 4 hours for the bike, but it was up and downhill. So completely different sport. That is super technical with mountain biking. And so in Ironman on the road, it's like a very methodical push-pull. And on mountain biking, it's basically about spiking your heart rate and being able to recover quickly and being able to technically do what they call like single track, and also like hop over large boulders, mud, sand, kiave thorns. I mean, you name it, you're like in it.
Have you been injured before during one of these races?
Yeah, multiple times. Luckily, knock on wood, not injured like I fell off my bike and got hurt, although they would always have like this blooper thing after XTERRA where they would show people in the medical tent, like literally just, stitches all over their face from face planting in the lava fields, or, like broken bones, compound fractures, people who got like really dehydrated, just not being able, just bad. Luckily.
And then it's like kind of amusing to watch, like, or it's kind of like a badge of honor.
It's like a badge of honor. It's a little crazy. And the year I did it actually was really cool, or one of the years. So the year I did Ironman, they used to have this thing that was sponsored by Hawaiian Airlines called the Hawaiian Double, the Hawaiian Airlines Double. And so it was doing Ironman, and the following Saturday you did XTERRA World Championships. So you did 2 World Championships in like a 7-day span. And that was, really exciting too, because you got to participate with these world-class athletes as a Hawaii born and raised, just everyday athlete. You were able to be with these like incredible athletes and be inspired by them and learn their stories. And
so what's the most important things you have to keep aware of in order to compete at this level?
Avoiding injury and nutrition are super important, and mindset's really important too. So nutrition and mindset, as I've learned through time, and I'm actually doing an online course at Cornell University right now, just about like,
you're teaching it, or you're
just taking a class just to learn more about like how our nutrition affects our emotional and physical state, but mainly like your emotions, because our gut is so important and it's so directly correlated with recovery time, rest time, your nutrition, just all these things really tie in to making sure that you don't, because you can get injured more if you don't have proper nutrition, things like that. So
like, what do you mean by proper nutrition then?
Making sure that you're eating the most nutrient dense food for your body and your body type. Like, we're all humans and we're all created different, like a thumbprint. And so it's really important to know the stages of life that you're in. For example, as a woman, as a preteen versus, like a 30-year-old woman, to premenopausal to postmenopausal, like your diet has to be very different. As an athlete, your diet is much more geared towards, as you know, Evan, you're an athlete, towards carbohydrates than you are.
I don't know if I call myself an athlete,
absolutely. But okay. You have to have a lot more protein. They need to make sure that they're complete proteins. So you can be plant-based, but you got to make sure that your proteins then are complete proteins so that you have enough amino acids to rebuild your muscles. So there's just like a lot, I don't know, that goes into it.
So is that what's in this book?
I wish I could say all of that. This is actually inspired. Eat Pono was inspired by Poet. So he's now 11. It started when he was 5 in kindergarten. And at Pono, they started composting their lunch. And he came home and said, "Mommy, why don't we compost?" And I was like, "Worms in my kitchen? I don't know about that." And he's like, "No, you don't have to have worms, but we need to compost. It's good for the environment." And I was like, okay. So we started researching about composting. We went to farms here, like Full Circle Farm in Waimanalo. Anything that he had a question about that I didn't know enough about, just like in life, I said, well, let's dig deeper and let's find out more. So we learned about composting, the different types of composting, why it's important to compost. Then they were growing a little garden at school, and my mom loves to garden. She had so many fruits, or has, in her yard. And Steve is a 4th-generation farmer. So Poet has grown up sort of seeing that you can just get your hands dirty. And he was always like picking up little seeds and putting them in his pocket. And then he'd get home and, he would put them in the paper towel and put them in the window and germinate them and then plant them. So then we ended up getting raised bed gardens so that he could explore that further. And so really the book came from his questions, which are, I would always say things that I didn't really think he was picking up on, like, you don't want to eat that. That's empty calories. That has no nutritional value. And he's like, well, what's nutritional value? And what are empty calories? And I was like, oh my God, what did I create? So we started reading nutrition. I taught him about reading nutrition labels. And, he wasn't a super strong reader at the time. He was just learning how to read, but I always joke he knew how to read nutrition labels before he knew how to read a book, because he knew what to look for. Like, what are the important things? Like we talked about earlier, for example, my mom, she's in a different stage in her life. So cholesterol is really important. What is she eating? Those are the things she looks for. Other people who may be pre-diabetic, what are they looking for when it comes to what is the sugar content in the food and all the hidden things, and what are additives, what are preservatives, what are fake sweeteners? And so I said, we don't want to be putting anything into our body that we wouldn't want to give to, for example, a pet that we love, or, to, in this case, my child. And so we made sure that as much as possible, we knew where our food came from, and because he was forcing me to ask these questions. So as an athlete, I always felt like, I was pretty much able to eat whatever I wanted to. And I didn't really think about where the food necessarily was coming from. I assumed that it was coming from the right places, that it was good, it was healthy, and then through his questions, I kind of reassessed and had to like backpedal a little bit. I think for kids, it's so much easier because they don't come with a knowledge base. We do. So like when COVID happened and adults are like, oh, I don't want to wear a mask. It's so annoying. It's itchy. It's bothering my ears. The kids were like, okay, wear a mask for 8 hours. Sure, no problem. So he challenged our family to sort of see things differently. And so we decided that this was something we wanted to embark in, which was sharing our stories about sourcing local, eating nutritiously, and living sustainably, and hopefully inspiring others to take that step too, because it's easy to go and buy something and just not look like what I was doing before, just like, oh yeah, just drink a Gatorade. Well, it may not be the best thing for us. Isn't there a coconut water, an alternative that's better for us?
This is like legit action right here, right? I mean, I didn't mean to.
Thank you.
And she signed it. Look at that.
Yeah.
I'm important now. What's the process of putting together a book like this and actually publishing it into something, so nice like this?
Well, thank you. Well, I say he's the co-author because, one, the inspiration came from him and the questions he was asking. Two, he writes a really beautiful letter. I had him sit down and I left all his misspellings and little, marks in there intentionally because I wanted it to be like capture the moment when he was 8 years old. And so it's a letter to people about why these things are important to him.
That's this one, right?
Yeah. And it talks about like sustainability without him knowing necessarily, without labeling it as sustainability. Okay. So I labeled it because I know the phrases and the terms and, what the world is looking at right now, what we're facing. But he didn't necessarily know any of that. All he knew is he loves to fish. He loves to eat what he catches. He's so disappointed when I tell him you can't eat that fish because it has ciguatera. So then he learned about what is ciguatera, which are the fish that I can eat, which are the, at what stage is a papillo okay to eat, and at what stage does it maybe have too much ciguatera that I can't, I shouldn't eat it. Mm-hmm. Those types of things. And then because most of the recipes were inspired by us, during COVID, it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner at home. He stayed home for a whole year. Pono provided us the option of online learning. And so he wanted to be in the kitchen, like, let's eat something healthy. And we would like Google for recipes. And there were a lot of things that were added sugar, muffins, cakes, pastries, French toast, whatever. And he was like, isn't there a better way, Mom? Like, didn't you say that eating some of those things, like, isn't there more nutritious things that we can eat? And so a lot of the recipes were inspired by that.
So these are recipes that you actually make and eat?
Yeah. So basically what I did was it was going to be a Christmas gift and it was not going to be for sale. So I put the book together in about 4 months. I asked Tara Young, who is she's a friend of mine, also a Pono graduate, whose son has been in the same class as Poet since preschool.
Is that Tara, Avi's Tara?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. She's a photographer? I didn't know that.
Well, her father was a photographer and it's one of her passions, but she doesn't do it professionally. And so I said, you're staying at home with COVID. I'm staying at home with COVID. Will you come over and take some pictures like of my dinner tonight? And she's like, sure. So we kind of refined, and I joke in the book that, it's not dinner at the house because I'm not a chef by any stretch of the imagination. I am basically a mom trying to put food on the table in 30 to 40 minutes or less and in a healthy way, knowing where my ingredients come from, trying to grow as many of them as I can, and which doesn't always work out because inevitably, the garden dies or you go on a trip or you put too much of something and not enough of something else. Or most recently, we have a beehive and you get stung by, 17 bees. Like you get swarmed.
Where did you get stung?
All over my whole body. I mean, my eye was stung right here. So I couldn't open my eye at the top of my head. Well, I went to check on them because our beekeeper that we had originally called, because what happened was Poet came screaming in the house and he usually isn't so, I was like, what happened? And he's like, there's a swarm of bees outside. And I was like, what? So I ran outside and on the plumeria tree, a swarm had come, a hive, and attached itself to one of the branches. And so I Googled, bee help in Hawaii, and I got a hold of someone who's a beekeeper, and he says, well, you have two options. I can come and take it, or we can build you a hive at home. And because Poet loves those things, I was like, well, this is another opportunity. I'm not a beekeeper, but hey, they chose us. So if the queen decides to stay, which there was no guarantee she would, he put her in the clip in a bee hive. And he says, you just basically have to point it out towards an open pathway so that they can, fly back and forth. So Steve built this little CMU block thing, and we put them kind of hidden out by the ocean, and they just kind of fly back and forth. And so I was just checking on them one day because it was during winter and they had said that they need food. So we drilled a little hole and we would do sugar water so they would have enough nectar. And so I went to check on them and I was coming back and I don't know what happened, but I guess maybe I shook the hive by accident. And man, I was filming it. I was like, oh, how fun. Look at the bees. Because Poet wasn't there. I wanted to show him the bees. I was like, oh, look. And I have the video of me. And then all of a sudden it goes, ah, and the camera drops and I'm running away. And I start screaming. So I learned afterwards, don't run. don't scream, don't wear dark colors, and don't ever jump in the water. Well, you know what I did that day? I started screaming to Steve, which carbon dioxide comes out, which aggravates bees. I started running around. I knew not to swat, but you can like flick them off. But Steve didn't know not to swat, so I had him come out because I was screaming. So they were already aggravated. So now they're swarming everywhere. And I thought, well, maybe he could help me because I couldn't open my face because they were like all around my face. I was like, can you just gently flick them off? And so he was trying to swat them, so it aggravated them more. I was wearing a black t-shirt, so they were all around my top and my head. And then I didn't know what to do, so now they were swarming him. So I said, run, jump in the ocean. Well, I read later that people drown because you will come up for air and the bubbles that are released when you jump in the water create more carbon dioxide, which aggravates the bees more. And so they start swarming over the water. People come up, they like ingest them, and then they are found dead with bees inside of them. Thank God in our
gruesome.
case, we survived.
Well, you live to speak about it.
But yeah, anyway, so that was our bee story. But I actually have someone coming to help me. We're ready to harvest our first honey. I kept the bees. It wasn't their fault.
So you do that with a telephoto lens now?
I
Go
hope
for
so.
it
I think I'm going to set
away.
up like a tripod in the yard so that in the event that something like this happens again, at least we'll have like a good story, you know? We'll have a film. And I plan to wear a beekeeping outfit next time. I just went out like, oh yeah, I'll just like feed the bees.
So you have like a regular beekeeping outfit or like a cute one?
I don't have one yet.
Oh.
I need one. My girlfriend gave me like one of those little mosquito nets for like at least your head, which is probably a good idea because that's actually the one that hurt the worst. I found 17 stingers in me, but the one that hurt the worst was right on top of my eye and right on top of my head.
How do you pull them out without squeezing the stuff
kind
inside?
of like with a credit card or whatever. It was, it was bad. But it was ironically the week before I went to go and try to run Mauna Kea. So it was just all really bad timing because...
And did you go and run Mauna Kea?
I did. I survived. I recovered. It took 2 days of like real recovery.
Like what kind of run are you talking about?
So Rachel Ross Bradley, she's another Pono graduate. She's been a friend of mine since high school. We paddled together in high school. She and I like to do these run adventures. So we ran Haleakala in 2021, I think it was. And then 2022.
What do you mean you run it? Like you run up or down or around?
Yeah, sorry. So we wanted to do adventures that didn't require racing because it's less pressure, less stress. We've been there, done that with the racing. There used to be a race called Run to the Sun, which went from Paia up to the top of Haleakala, so 10,000 feet of climbing, and you ran the whole way. And then during COVID, they were going to have a virtual one. And so we didn't know they were going to have it. And so we set the date and time of our run, and then it was promoted online. And so I called the race director and said, oh, we'd love to sign up. And so he's like, okay. So we did it virtually, but you could do it all in one day. So that's what we did. So that was our first run adventure. And that was, for both of us, our first ultra marathon.
So in miles, what is that?
That was 34.5 miles. So an ultra is anything over 42K, which is
uphill?
26, all uphill, which is actually better. So we talked about earlier eating for your stage in life. So for running, this is actually really good for us, is running uphill, not downhill, let me tell you. When you've been running for 20
I don't even like to
years,
drive uphill.
Yeah, there's something really great about running uphill. It's really slow, but it's beautiful. Like I told myself on that run, if I hadn't done a channel swim yet, and I said, if I can make it from Paia to the top, because, innately that's what my sport was running and not swimming. So I said it was a confidence builder for me. If I can make it to the top of the 10,000 feet, then I can look down at the channel, the first one that we did, which was the Au channel from Maui to Lanai. And I said, I'll be able to have the confidence to swim the channel. And so that was really exciting. So we did that one. And then I tried in 2020.
And did you, when you got to the top, say, okay, I can do this channel now?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then I did it like a month later. So I think we did that one like in, I can't remember if it was April or June.
And how long was that channel?
That was it ended up being the longest. It ended up being 13.3 miles because we got really bad current. So it was supposed to be 8.8 miles, I think, is what that channel is. And it's supposed to be the easiest, the entry one. And it ended up being 13.3 miles. We swam a lot that day.
Did you feel like ever when you're doing it, like, I'm going to quit?
Oh, multiple times. And we saw sharks that day, which did not help. I definitely wanted to get out. But
when you say you saw them, like, what do you mean? Like they swim under you or?
So we jumped in with a group. My girlfriend Cindy and I jumped in with a group that we didn't really know. We knew the organizer, but we didn't know the other people. They had come from the mainland to swim the swim. One was a UH swimmer, a graduate, and then the rest were sort of here. And so it's sort of like adventure travel. So they adventure travel here to do channels because like the Molokai Channel, for example, is part of the Ocean Sevens swimming channels around the world. These are not. These are shorter, but there's someone here who organizes the Maui Nui channel swim. So you swim 3 channels in 3 days. And so Cindy and I decided, okay, well, let's just try our first one. We'll jump in with them. And so we started, but you couldn't, we just jumped in. So we didn't pick the day or time. And the conditions were really challenging, like very rough. There was high winds. So the top of the ocean was white caps everywhere. And at times you couldn't even see the swimmer if they were like 5 feet from you because there was like a wave. And I mean like a wind wave breaking between the two of you. You couldn't hear anything because you have your cap on. And
I didn't even know what direction to go.
in that case, we had a fishing boat who was the escort, but because of the type of boat it was, he had to be pretty far away from us. And because the conditions were so rough, he couldn't be close. So you could kind of see it in the distance. And then there was a kayaker because one of the women, her husband was on a kayak, but the kayak kept filling with water. And so the kayak kept having to go to the boat, get it pulled out, dump out the water and get back in. So it was just kind of a hot mess. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong that day. In my mind, if you ask the organizer, he probably would say something totally different because he's swam more channels than anyone in the Hawaiian Islands. And so he's used to any conditions. But for me, it was really terrifying and it was really challenging. And I was expecting like 5 to 6 hours. And when we were 7+ hours and we could not make headway. So I always say the difference between running and swimming for me is when you're running and you're tired, you can stop and you're not moving backwards. Mm-hmm. You just stop, take a break, and then you still can make headway. When you're swimming and you stop and you tread water, for the most part, unless you're super fortunate and the tide or the current is pulling you towards shore, you're moving sideways or backwards. Like, you don't want to stop. So you want your feedings to be super quick. And the conditions in the channels can change very quickly and very drastically. So we had, like I said, the high chop, the rough waters, and then we weren't making a lot of headway. We had already been out 6 hours, and then we were swimming and sort of our group swimming like this. It was like, swimming side by side sort of, because you also in open ocean swimming, you can't draft. So something you do in triathlon is you want to get a draft. It helps you to swim about 30% less effort than the person in front of you. In open ocean swimming, you're not allowed to draft. So you have to swim next to or far enough away from someone that you're not catching a draft off of them. And then we saw the sharks. So in channel swimming, you go from 20 feet to 100 feet to 300 feet very quickly. And then you're just looking down to deep ocean. And I don't know if you've ever jumped in out there, but that's just, you don't see much.
I don't like it.
Yeah, it's a little creepy. And when you see the sun rays coming in, It can be super beautiful and magical, or it can be really
And that's where you start to see things out of like your corner of your eye or so on. Whether they're there or not, who knows?
Exactly.
Yep.
And there's a lot of like creatures out there that we don't really have close to shore. So like weird, I think it's called Pele's purse or something. It's like a type of a jellyfish type thing that they have out there. There's like lots of
those slipper fish or whatever, the one that bit.
Oh, that's a cookie cutter fish.
Oh, cookie cutter.
Yeah. Luckily, we don't see those because those only come out at nighttime and those come from the super, super deep. Those are attracted to the bioluminescence. But we get a lot of kind of like jellyfish parts that fog the water a little bit and they sting you or you get no-see-em. So there's a lot of like stuff going on out there. But that day we saw these sharks and there was probably like 5 of them and they were circling underneath us and I just lost it. And my girlfriend knows that I'm terrified of sharks. So she got close. She was so cute. She was swimming with a snorkel. She gets her snorkel off and she sees one coming from behind, and she like points it out. And then she calls one of the swimmers, Dan, who's a super strong swimmer. And she goes, Dan, get by Candes. And so all of us just got together to create like a larger mass to scare the sharks away, hopefully, because ideally they're not going to want to mess with something that's bigger than them. And it wasn't tiger sharks. There were some sort of other sharks that just sort of were circling, and they were circling up, and then they just circled back down and they were gone. And at that point I was like, I'm getting out. This is just way more than I bargained for. Who needs to be a channel swimmer anyway? This is not for me. And at that point, one of the people got out, and then I looked at the boat and literally it was like this. and I get seasick, and I was already seasick in the ocean. I couldn't imagine. So my choice was get out and get seasick and still have to watch the swimmers. It's not like they can take you to shore. You're out there with the other swimmers until you guys finish. So I said, okay, I'm sticking with it. But that day I got hypothermia. Like it was bad. Like I was.
What does that mean, hypothermia? Your body temperature goes too cold, and then what happens?
Yeah, super cold. You can't stop shivering, and it's hard to make decisions clearly.
Like while you're swimming, you got it.
Yeah, I was really cold because we kept having to stop. There was one swimmer who was struggling, and he was swimming farther behind us. And so in channel swimming, basically you have to stay with the group because it's very dangerous. You could lose a swimmer.
So it's not really a
there.
race. It's just finish it.
Absolutely not a race. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are people in our second and third one, we were on record-setting time. Now, needless to say, we did not break the record. But if the conditions are great and you're swimming together and you're not racing, but you're swimming at a good clip because you want to make sure that, oh, great, we have good conditions. We don't know how long they're going to last. You're going to keep going, kind of pushing yourself at that 80 to 90% because you're hoping to be able to maximize the good conditions as long as you can. Yeah, definitely not a race. I mean, maybe some people it's a race. Like I said, I'm not really a swimmer, so I'm just out there to finish it.
So how much was left for you after you got the hypothermia?
Oh, like another almost 2 hours. And I looked at her. I was like, oh, I think I'm going to get out. I told my friend Cindy. She looked at me. She said, you're not getting out. Put your head down. Start swimming. We're moving backwards right now. Just start swimming. I was like, okay. And so the interesting thing about channel swimming also is you have to start above the high water mark. So the boat takes you to wherever you're going to start. You swim into shore. So that part doesn't count. Then you go above the high water mark. You kind of wave to them.
What's the high water mark?
Just, like on the beach where the water, the high water mark on the beach. So you go above that to shore. I'm on shore. And then they start the timer. And then from that moment, you can't touch anything until you reach the shore of the other island. And then you go above the high water mark. And now you're on shore. But you got to get back on the boat because they got to take you back home. So now you got to swim back out. So my girlfriend actually, in that one, I just was uncontrollably shivering my whole body. I just didn't feel well. And I have Raynaud. So my fingers and toes were like extremely painful because like I don't get any circulation. So they're purple. My whole body. And so she's like, I'm going to lay on you now because body heat's the best thing. So, she just laid on us until all the swimmers were on shore. We were above the high water mark. And then we swam back out to the boat and got covered up with one of those, a blanket. And then I got seasick on that boat on the way back to Maui, which is sort of the icing on the cake, throwing up over the side of the boat after you finish the event because your stomach's kind of
So
unhappy.
which part of this is enjoyable?
That one wasn't.
Okay,
So we said we're never going to do it again.
I'm looking for like what's fun in this, and it's like every time I'd watch the people coming in from the Molokai to Oahu on race, and they'd always be like, "Oh my God, that was so hard," and I never felt inspired to do it. Like, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah. No, I got to tell you, the next 3 channels we did, we made sure our team was, people that we knew really well, that we swam the same pace for the most part. We were committed to staying together the whole time, no matter what. If someone couldn't, they were going to get out of the boat so it didn't jeopardize everyone else's swim. We were going to go on a good day. We were going to choose a day with less wind. We chose a boat that could stay closer to us, and they were magical. They were magical experiences. I think anytime you push your body and your mind past the limits of a place that could have never imagined, you come out just alive, stronger, and with a greater appreciation. And I always say that life's challenges for me, like I'm able to get through things in life because of the sports that I do, and I'm able to do the sports that I do because of the challenges I've experienced in life. I'm not really sure if I'm saying that the right way. I think they go hand in hand.
Because of the challenges allow you to push through?
Yeah, they teach you to be uncomfortable. They teach you to focus on the positive. They teach you to always sort of reset, like in a moment of crises. My girlfriend, uses the term mental fitness. It's sort of like you are able to reground and then to look at sort of in that moment, sort of step outside of your body and say, okay, really what's happening here? And to pull on those experiences that you've had, like anything in life, everyone goes through challenges. Seeing your father having to go through, struggling with the cancer and how it affected your family and all the pain and hurt that you felt. And you can pull on that in a moment when you're out there in the ocean and you think, I just can't go anymore. And you say, yes, I can. I was able to withstand this for years. I was able to be there for him and, outside of how I was feeling. So I'm going to, you sort of just tap into that. And there's a strength that comes from within. I think.
That being said, then, what has been your greatest challenge in your life, and how did you overcome it or deal with it?
Probably my parents' divorce, and then my dad's sort of like accident, and having to deal with just the blended family and all of the pain. We have a blended family, and so there are different intentions or different value sets. We are the product of our environment, and so when you're raised in a different environment, you have different communication styles. And it wasn't just so much his accident, it was more so we've been struggling with his business and with family issues for 30 years. So
You mean now or back then or something? What are you talking about?
now,
Oh.
still struggle with family issues now, because of this blended family that never truly healed. And it's easy to compartmentalize it because you have to, and because you don't want to. I always say, I never want to use a challenge as a crutch. I want to use it as an opportunity to, to grow and to develop, but it's still challenging. On certain days when you're dealing with, ongoing lawsuits and other things, you just think to yourself, like, is this really necessary? Is that how I want to live my life? No, I want to look at the good. I want to flourish. I want to draw from those negative experiences, and I don't want to stay in that space. I want to create good.
What do you think would be required for everyone to heal then in that?
Compassion, I think, from one another. I think human connection is first and foremost, like, so important, because even though I feel really grounded, for example, in nature, and in Hawaii, it's also because of the people who are here. So all of these things, like every event that I've done, yes, it was me and it was the event, but it was about the people that I was with. And I would have never done the training or got through those moments, like with the sharks with Cindy, or, with the training without Rachel, or, with my mom and my sister through the pageants, or, without having people in your life. I mean, I've been blessed with so many mentors and just the amazing strength of my family. So I think it just really all comes down to that human connection. And I think that's why COVID was so challenging, because we were told, like, don't touch anyone, don't get close to them, like, don't hug them, don't connect with them, don't physically be in their space. And so right now I'm working on a program called Aina Guardian, and it's about helping our younger generation, hopefully, become empowered to deal with eco-anxiety, which is like a real thing now. Our children are told that this world is, you got to wear sunscreen because it's bad for your skin, but you got to make sure that you wear the right sunscreen because you don't want to hurt the reef. And then there's coral bleaching. And then there's this huge garbage patch out there with this gyre of trash, and there's nothing you can do about it, and then there's a hole in the ozone, and it's just like there's global warming, and the global warming is creating all these natural disasters. So I think it's about, like, I don't know, creating those connections that give people the confidence or the skills necessary to be stronger, and to be able to then, like we said earlier, that whole community service, to be there. If you're good, you can be good for your family, and your family can be good for your extended friends and family, and they can be good for the community. And so I think it all just comes down to human connection.
If your father was here, what do you think that he would do or say to help kind of mend and heal the wound?
I think, honestly, it's our responsibility. It's our kuleana. I think it is the way it is because we probably all still have a lesson to learn. So no matter how difficult it is, just trying to find the reason, to find the rationale, to find a new way, to be more compassionate, to understand that oftentimes when someone treats you a certain way, it's not because of you, it's because of maybe something that they're struggling with. And so stopping for a moment, like I said at the beginning, it's about someone coming up and saying, hey, how are you today? And just sort of like connecting with them and being open to being a good friend. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I try to instill in my nieces and nephews, and especially with Poet, is that in order to have a friend, you need to be a friend. And that's really important. And I think that's overlooked a lot of times. It's like, instead of thinking about how what they did made you feel bad, well, what have you done for them lately? Like, look internally and say, okay, what could I do? So one of the things that we practice with Poet is, if there's an argument or a disagreement with one of his friends, I always encourage him to be the first one to reach out and apologize. Just blanket apology. I am so sorry for whatever I did that might have offended you or hurt you. If you want to talk about it, I'd love to, fix it. Otherwise, I'm just really sorry. Can we reset? Can we start over? And that's hard. For a kid at his age, he doesn't use all those words. It's like very short and sweet. I'm sorry. Can we be friends? But it's sort of teaching him that sort of, the empathy gene, which children are not born with, I learned in a book. It's something that's learned behavior. So making sure that we're modeling that behavior also.
So if I was to ask you then, Candes, how are you doing today?
Good. I swim in the ocean. I see you out there every day. And I always, my latest thing is that like life is like the ocean and you never know what you're going to get until you get in. And some days are going to be good days. Some days are going to be bad days. But today's a good day,
What makes it a good day?
I have this amazing connection with you. And our group this morning was happy to be there. We all swam together as a team. There was no dissension. I mean, even the silliest things like dissension in my swim group can really upset my day. When people don't stay together or someone wants to swim the outside line, someone wants to swim the inside line, you spend your whole workout worrying, where is everyone? Instead of actually getting a workout. It was like exhausting and it's supposed to be fulfilling and invigorating. So we had a great swim. The conditions were tough, but it was still a good swim. Human connection with you and getting to share about this project, our Eat Pono book, which is like so important. And I am so proud. Like today, if you were to ask me like, oh, what do you do? I'd say I'm a co-author of a cookbook with my son, and it truly has opened up so many conversations for me and made me aware of so many amazing like organizations in our state that are doing good work to try to help people find a healthier, happier life, and through it, I've made incredible connections with different local organizations that prop you up. And, I think validation is something that's really important in life too. So being able to be seen and validated for my work versus just like, oh, Candes Miss Hawaii, or oh, Candes, athlete, or oh, Candes, she was on stage at Diamond Head, or whatever they think they know of you, but like being able to be validated for your work and people being inspired and wanting to ask questions about it, like that's a good day.
Do you have a spiritual belief or practice?
So I was baptized and raised Roman Catholic, but I'd say that when my mom moved to Hawaii, we went to Sunday school, and then I decided around 13, I was kind of like unsure when my parents got divorced. And so I started going to church alone, and nothing against Catholicism or the church. But I just felt like I couldn't really connect to the message anymore. And I felt that some of the things that I didn't see eye to eye with some of the things they were preaching, but I do believe in a lot of the core values of like Christianity and religion, but I've also traveled so much. And so I've had the privilege of being able to be in the presence of different and immersed in the culture of different religions. And so I believe that there's a higher power and a higher being, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I can ascribe to like one religion per se. I don't practice. I believe that my religion is...
Well, it's not religion so much, it's more spirituality. Because there's a spirituality kind of vibe and message in a lot of the things that you say.
Yeah. Well, I believe that we're definitely part of the universe's energy. And for example, when I die, I'd like to be cremated and put in the ocean because I believe that I'm going to be then part of the universe again and part of the ecosystem and sort of going around and having been there and seen the spirit leave a body when a body is no longer a human or a person anymore. I think that also was like really telling in my life too, where I felt that. I felt the spirit leave. And so I don't really know how to put into words any of that, but I just know that I want to be the best person I can be. And that's probably the biggest challenge is there's not really like a benchmark, right? And we're always going to falter. We're only given one time around in this life. And so I just, want to make the most of it. I feel like you can have everything in the world, but as long as you're appreciative of it, you're not spoiled. And so I feel that way about life. I want to make sure I appreciate every moment.
If you could go back and be a support or comfort for yourself as a child when your parents were going through their divorce or when your father was in his accident, would you do that? And if you would, what would you say or do?
I guess I'd like the opportunity even to do it now. I would want to say that this moment doesn't have to define you. in the way you're feeling right now, that you have the ability to control the outcome and that you're not a victim, and that bad things happen to good people every day for no good reason. And so I would just want to remind my young, 8-year-old self and then 17-year-old self that this does not have to define you, and you can be whatever and whoever you want to be.
That's nice. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you feel like we should cover?
Well, I guess one of the things that are really important to me that we didn't touch on too much is about like giving back in our community and how we can do that. And I feel like, the community we live in has given me so much. And so there's a quote that I read recently that said, if you can't pay it back, pay it forward. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I've had the privilege of having so many amazing mentors in my life. And they've given me the strength, wisdom, knowledge, confidence to be able to excel in different areas that, I sort of dabbled. And I would hope that we can all choose to give back in whatever way, whether it's time, talents, or treasure that we can. And I think that's something that, at least for me, gives me purpose outside of myself. So sometimes when I hear that people are struggling, or have a hard time finding purpose, or I know a lot of like young people today are struggling with social media and the effects of that. And so I encourage people to go out and volunteer, because I think that taking the attention away from yourself and how you're feeling to actually like connect with someone outside who maybe is dealing with other issues can help to bring some relevancy, and you can gain a deeper perspective. And so that's been a guiding principle, I think, in my life. Pono taught us that to whom much is given, much is expected. And so throughout my life, in my humble way, I've tried to give back to the organizations, and that continues with now at Hawaii Community Foundation. We've started an Eat Pono Fund to be able to help other nonprofits who are already doing good work in the community by creating awareness around them and hopefully being able to give back to them so that they can continue to do the good work that they're already doing.
Can you share a story in terms of your community work or your community interaction that is meaningful to you?
So I created a scholarship after I graduated from the Shiloh College of Business, and it's an endowed scholarship. So it took several years to be able to finally get to the point where it could give off money and give off scholarship. And every year it's so meaningful because I get a letter from the recipient, and they share with me how it made their life easier, how it made their studies easier, what they use the money towards. And so there's a luncheon that the Shiloh College puts on, and you get to actually sit and meet the recipient of your scholarship. And so a few years ago, before COVID, I went to a luncheon, and there was this really bright young woman there, and she was a recipient of my scholarship. And so we talked a lot, and I said, hey, have you ever thought about running for Miss Hawaii? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, it crossed my mind, but I'm so busy with my studies now. But, thank you. That's a huge compliment. And I said, well, it's a great way to earn scholarship money. So it's not just like, something fun to go on stage in a bikini, but you actually like earn thousands of dollars of scholarship money. If you want to go on to graduate school, you could actually pay for your whole graduate school. So she's like, oh, okay, well, thanks. I'll think about it. And 3 years later, she called me on the phone and said, hey, so remember how we met at luncheon and I was a recipient? I said, yes. And she says, well, I just won the preliminary title. I'll be competing at Miss Hawaii this year. And I was so excited. And I said, well, listen, anything I can do to help. And so we remained friends. And ultimately, she became Miss Hawaii. And she went on to Miss America. And I believe someday that's what we talked about with the, paying it forward is if you can't pay it back, pay it forward. She had this amazing opportunity. And I know that she'll give back to her community. And so it's sort of like the cycle of life, whether you look at it of the upcycling of our food to go back into composting, to be able to put back into the land, to be able to create the banana again so you can make the banana bread. So it's just, and so that's like the energy that I believe is kind of what keeps us going. And so I guess I'd like to share that. It's just that I think our world could be a better place if we all gave back. And I don't mean you have to go out and start a, 501c3. I just mean like, find a way to help a neighbor or help your family or, offer to pick someone up from the hospital if they're not feeling well, or give back. If you don't have time, then, you can find organizations that align with your values.
Well, thank you for reminding me on that, because Greater Good Radio actually was started around that premise about giving back and doing community service and community leadership and so on.
Well, that's why I kind of
Yeah.
agreed to come on today, because I loved the idea of you interviewing, different people in the community and all about that, about the greater good that they're doing. So thank you, because this is like your community service, being able to shine the light on people and allow them the opportunity to share their story, and for people to be able to understand who they are better and get to know what drives them.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you for coming on today. You're an inspiration, like understanding more about the things that you've had to go through and overcome, and watching and listening to it, how you stay in the positive side of it and make it into something fruitful, and then, dissect everything and do the work that's needed with and following through. It's inspirational to me. So I appreciate you. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. I couldn't do it without my family and those who love me around me. So that's first and foremost. So thank you.
Okay. I will see you in the water.
Okay. See you there.
Yeah. If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.